Hello, everyone. It's fabulous and exciting to be able to spend time with you today and to talk about something that I have lived and breathed and thought about for a very long time, which is aspects of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Some might refer to it as diversity, inclusion. There's a number of different sorts of words that sort of proliferate. What I want to do today is talk just a little bit about myself, just to give you a sense of some of my background. And then what I would like to do is actually interrogate those three words and spend some time actually giving you maybe a few new ones so that we can do some of the really hard work that actually our sectors demand and our sectors ultimately need to be able to produce a research and innovation community and sector where everyone can contribute and flourish to the best of their abilities. And we really want to nourish our communities and our contributors. So I am delighted to join you today and thank the organizers for reaching out for me to join. So as Joanna mentioned, I am Dr. Karen Salt. I am Deputy Director within UKRI Strategy Directorate. I've come into the organization after a period of secondment where I was directing the Center for Research in Race and Rights at the University of Nottingham. Led large research teams working with from community researchers to postdocs, various government departments. And I've done quite a lot of work on transformation, kind of large scale institutional change. And I'm a specialist in questions of like governance, especially issues around kind of collective governance and governance of different sets of systems and ideas. So the type of work I do is systems analysis, really, in a more interdisciplinary way. And I have a deep love for science, having studied physics and chemistry and biology, as well as mathematics. I've taken that same sort of complexity theory almost to really starting to understand and dig underneath these questions of equality, diversity, inclusion. So I'm delighted to work within UKRI with a whole range of creative specialists and researchers and innovators and policymakers, especially to deliver right now, what many of you know will be our new CEO's a kind of mission and vision that has sort of revitalized UKRI moving forward. And really, I think put the challenge before us of how to work collaboratively with our partners, with other stakeholders, and with other sectors and communities like yourselves. So I promised I would talk a little bit now about these words of equality, diversity, inclusion. I don't have a slide deck about this. This is going to be some storytelling for you, where I'll try to set the scene around working on this terminology. And because we only have 3 words, shouldn't be too complicated to try to follow as we start to kind of think our way through all of this. And the first one that I'll start with is thinking about the questions of equality. Now, what's really quite fascinating to me about equality is how ubiquitous it is. Many think they know exactly what it means. For some, it's connected to monitoring. So it's usually somehow connected to data, some set of information that they collect around sets of folks that correlate and connect to different kind of protected characteristics, as we call it. So there's this kind of compliance, almost monitoring aspect to this and sets of information. Now, we know that quite a lot of that work is self-disclosure. So people have to choose whether or not they want to disclose or talk about things. And as much as we'd like to encourage everyone to say everything about themselves, it is still people's choice. And some feel very uncomfortable about sharing whether or not they have a disability or whether or not they feel comfortable talking about a pregnancy. And there are ways and things we need to do to work on that. But we also need to, I think, address the sort of underlying problematics, maybe with our entire construction, with where we're thinking about equality. if we look at something like the public sector equality duty or these sets of kind of legal frameworks, what they often suggest, and this is really helpful, is equality of opportunity. How do we essentially open the door to more people to come in? And this is great. There's absolutely nothing fundamentally wrong with this. But if we look across a number of sectors and we look across a number of societies, even more globally, we're seeing a situation where we're not seeing massive shifts in terms of who's walking through that door, if we're looking at the kind of widest segment of the population as possible. So there's a question, I think, for all of us, which is equality of opportunity what we want, or do we want to change the way the door looks, right? Do we want to actually create a situation where we're not just inviting people in if they look a certain way, or if they have a certain typology, if they have a certain background or a career? We're actually wanting to break down the whole range of things of what people could contribute and who that might ultimately be. And for many, this means moving away from thinking about equality, meaning we'll keep everything exactly the same and we'll just let a few more people in, to equity, to really starting to think, what are the actual barriers and the sets of circumstances that many may be experiencing that are disincentivizing them to be able to even get to the door, to even be able to see that there's a door even there, much less be able to walk through it. And as I said before, kind of flourish in that environment. So this is a word I'd like to encourage all of you to think a little bit more about, which is this concept of equity. What does that look like to sort of create an environment where you recognize the types of opportunities and the type of knowledge that different people might have, and ultimately the ways that we might have to work together across multiple sectors to rebalance the opportunities for people to participate in science and in research, and to rebalance who might actually be able to do that, as opposed to just putting out an invitation that says, we welcome contributions from X or Y group. We're really nice, come play with us. We might need to do a bit more work to really start to understand what sort of inequalities or disparities might be baked into our societies, into our systems, much less the sort of perspectives around the significant contributions that different people make. But as I said, I'm also interested in thinking about these other sets of words that sit around this kind of EDI. And one significant one is this question of diversity. And for many, again, perfectly good word, perfectly good way to describe how to bring more people in. But this often means, as I said, bringing more people in who have the same kind of career, or have the same kind of pattern, or have worked in the same sort of fields, or trained a particular way. And what we end up with sometimes is a kind of narrowing of what we might mean about who might be able to contribute. Now, I'm not saying in any way to the specialism and training and the knowledge that is generated from deep engagement is somehow problematic. But instead, we might want to spend some time, instead of thinking about diversity, which tends to default quite a lot to visible diversity, or some form of diversity that people could ultimately see or describe in terms of characteristics. I'm starting to really enjoy the word range. How do we actually encourage range without limits, so that we actually get a whole wide set of people who can contribute fantastic ideas, amazing innovations, and we don't necessarily start to sort of make narrowing restrictions in terms of who that could be, and what background they might have, because we've created a space where it's not just we want 4 more apples to come into the room, or we need 3 more green chairs to sit around a table, but we actually want a range of perspectives. We want a range of contributions, a range of ideas, so that we can assemble really strong creative teams, and creative thinkers, and makers, to be able to move forward. So there's something about thinking about how does our criteria or the way we promote or the way we recruit or the way we even talk to each other about knowledge and about information, where we might be restricting what that range might be and ultimately starting to assemble the same types of folks quite consistently. We talk a lot within UKRI right now about excellence and criteria and what may be happening with the narrowing of those sets of ideas, so that essentially we end up with the same types of stuff that is coming out, the same ideas, the same sorts of structures, if you will, the same sort of conceptualizations. And again, this isn't to say that we don't want people traveling down roads that others have gone in terms of knowledge or information, or that you can't work on your widget and the widget isn't good. We love widget makers. This is really important. But when we really are starting to think about how do we value the contribution across multiple teams, from technicians to data scientists to cleaners, the role and importance of cleaners right now, and security to allow many places to be COVID safe, means that they're playing a really critical role. And again, the more we expand that range of who's part of our systems and contribute, I think the more we can start to understand that it's not about one type of person being able to be in the system. It's about bringing everybody in ways that recognizes the contributions that they have. But there's one more word that I think I'd like to spend a little bit of time kind of unpacking, and that's this word of inclusion. Again, perfectly solid word. We use it all the time, but there's a challenge to this word. And I think the one really significant challenge to it is that it tends to mean addition or insertion. And it often, for some, might mean that the system stays exactly the way it is. Absolutely nothing changes about it, but you add a few more people. And we sometimes encourage this by thinking about reaching certain targets, or wanting to go out and recruit more people of X background, or really trying to shift what the demographics look like. But I really want to challenge you, because I'm doing the same sort of challenges to myself, to think, do we really want to invite more people to this party? Exactly the way the party is? Or do we want to do things like maybe change the way the party is structured? Maybe change the way the system actually works? How do we create a culture that is so fair and so just and equitable that people want to stay in it? They want to have long careers in it. They want to flourish and contribute with others in it. How do we recognize that value and contributions that others all can give, while we also really think, okay, what could we do with the environment that we've created? Not just add a few more people in who can be more miserable, maybe a bit sad, maybe a bit overworked, maybe not excited about doing research or science. How do we think differently? And here, again, I'm playing with new words. And again, inclusion works good. It definitely talks about where we could go, but it doesn't capture the notion of collaboratively building together, or what continuously reinvigorating, right? Things that ultimately make it very clear that it's not that we're dissatisfied with the world we've created in research and in innovation, but we want it to constantly be as innovative as actually doing research itself, right? That we're grounding it with the kind of vitality and the kind of creative energy that ultimately allows it to be a place, as I said, where all can flourish and contribute. And as you can see, the way I've been talking about all of this, it doesn't get us around testing and piloting and intervening and assessing and evaluating and monitoring. It doesn't get us around that, but it changes this from a compliance culture, or one where it's all about trying to ask people about their backgrounds, into one where we can actually start to do some vitally creative things within it. And again, I've set this in front of you as our challenge. I look forward to seeing what the questions might come from you as we start to kind of unpack what does that mean in practice, and how do you do this within your actual roles in your environment. But I invite you to sort of continue to think around this together with me and Joanna for the next few months. So over to you, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Karen. A really thought-provoking talk. The questions are already starting to come in, so I'll jump straight into those. The space sector, this is from Kathy Bowden, is collecting great evidence of the makeup of the skills sector through the census, as I mentioned before. And there's a space skills advisory panel, ED&I champion, who's Craig Brown. So we've got lots developing there. What do you think would be the most important piece of advice that should be included as that team and that group really work to develop that strategy?
Oh, okay, that's a good big question. I haven't seen the strategy, so I'm not 100% sure what's in already and what's not in. But I would say that one crucial thing for people starting to do strategic work is that they start to really reckon with, are they working on root causes and root issues, or are they looking at impacts? And there's nothing wrong with looking at impacts, but there may be things that are actually happening within other parts of society. They may be happening within sectors. They could be happening within other domains. They could be economically motivated, and it's just sort of recognizing when you're doing strategic work that really you're not necessarily going to always be able to target those root causes just because of the nature of where you are as an institution and what you're working on, but you can align. And you might be able to strategically work with others. And that's like from what work centers all the way through with other government departments who might be able to do a bit more heavy lifting around some of those root causal issues, but you still have a vital and important work to contribute. So I think just really starting to identify what the problems are and really starting to understand the levers and the drivers that you have on the actual mechanisms that you have to try to deal with those are really critical. But again, trying to realize where you can align with others, both in the exact sector of space work, but also I think across the wider domain, because we're often within EDI working on issues that are big, quite large, and alliances work really well for that.
That's brilliant. Great advice. I'm sure we'll all be taking that on board. A question from Dr. Anna Hogg at the University of Leeds. How is UKRI bringing together expertise from across all the research councils to help deliver practical action that's so desperately needed to improve ED&I in our scientific community?
Great question. As I said, I've been in UKRI for a bit of time now, and one of the really first things to do was to both create the sort of governance structures to enable equality, diversity, inclusion to really embed it and flourish across the organization. I don't have to essentially explain to this community how complicated UKRI is as an organization. For a systems person, it's a bit exciting having so many different entities to kind of interface with. But we've drawn together what we call an implementation group across all the councils. So these are EDI leads, policy leads that are working on these areas. We also have an EDI data task force that pulls together those who are working specifically around kind of data aspects and data work across all the councils as well. And then we also have a program board which pulls from the whole organization, including like funding policy and ops side to draw folks together to contribute. There is an external advisory group for EDI, for UKRI, and that's a really important group that covers career stages as well as other sectors and people from various government departments. And they've been significant for us, I think, to really challenge us and challenge our thinking.
Brilliant. Questions are coming in thick and fast, so we'll see if we can get one, possibly two more. This is a good one from Margaret Harris. Changing the structure of the party. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would it be?
Changing the structure of the party. Well, I think we've got a serious capacity building issue often around at least some groups and in terms of underrepresentation. So I really want to work with institutions about how are they supporting various folks that they're bringing in, because there's one thing essentially to have a recruitment round where you target particular groups and you bring them in and then they can get abandoned. in environments that may not feel familiar to them. And so it's a real key issue about what is that support that's there, both financial support, but also the kind of mentoring, the sort of support about navigating the system and the networks and the interactions. We can't force these things on people, and you need to learn what people ultimately need. But many institutions don't do that work as well, or they do it primarily for maybe very new folks coming in, and then they have a lot of mid-level folks that just can get quite lost in terms of where they might go next. So there's quite a lot, I think, that we can do around making the party be one that people can advance and move through in ways where it's not just about bringing people in, but it's about allowing them to flourish over a longer period of time and giving them the permission to be mobile and being able to move through and into different parts.
That's great. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for Q&A, but there were a number of questions coming in about less visible disabilities and the impact that not necessarily conforming to social norms can have. So yes, definitely something to pick up in the networking session over lunch, hopefully.